Warder Adrian Flechyr of the Middle Kingdom, and we are going to look at a more period look at the lunge, how to develop it, looking more on the Italian side of things, based off the Italian masters we have from the end of the 16th century, the beginning of the 17th century, including Capoferro, Fabris, Giganti, and also Bondi di Maso, which is a little bit later, more into the Baroque period, but he does a very, very good and clear job of defining terms. The other people I've worked with on this particular thing is Guy Windsor of the Sword School in Helsinki. If you've seen his Duelist's Companion book, he has a lot of information. There's also a lot of other information on his website about this also. Also, the Order of the Seven Hearts, Tom Leone's site, and Steve Wright's book site. They're the folks who did the translation of Fabris that we have from Chivalry Bookshelf. It's an incredibly good source. In my opinion, the cleanest, most accurate description in good modern English of what fencing was like in the end of the 16th century. Okay, the lunge. First we're going to look at how the heck do you determine how long you're supposed to lunge in the first place? What's the maximum? You may have heard some stuff from Sweating them. Oh, you can lunge 12 feet. That's how far you're supposed to go. Blah, 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 woof, woof. Okay. If I could borrow you for a second. Mechanically, figure how tall you are as a person, right? You've got an arm length, and you've got a sword length. What's the absolute maximum distance your body can make? That would be a perfectly horizontal line, correct? I'm 6 foot tall, my sword's roughly about 4 feet long, and I've got maybe about a foot of distance above my head to my wrist. So that's 6, 7, and 4. Roughly about 11 feet. Let's check it. If you would do kind of drew a drop line here, Irene, if you could check just to make sure that my feet are exactly at the 0 mark, essentially.
There. Good.
You're half inch shy of 11 feet. Yep. This is a 42-inch blade. I usually have my 45. It usually goes just slightly over. Okay. If everyone here has any math skills at all, you've probably heard of the Pythagorean theorem. If I draw a triangle, and I use this 11-foot mark as the bottom, my stance is here, and then if I lunge, what happens when you lunge? You get this beautiful angled line, the hypotenuse. It can never be as long as that bottom line. It just physically can't. So if your measurements come out to 11 feet, it's impossible for you to actually lunge 11 feet unless you literally fall straight down onto the floor and be level. So if you would, again, see where I am.
Your two ranges up.
Yes, that's actually fine.
Okay.
Probably just over about 10. Just on 10 feet, yep. You're pretty close, and probably you can figure out from the tip height down to the ground what it is. You want a nice, beautiful line for your back foot straight out. And here's where we'll get into safety and such in a second. So there's what you're looking at. Thinking distance-wise, the other thing to consider more as a mnemonic, if anything, is your actual on-guard distance. Most people don't even think about this. How much room do you take up physically? Anton? Probably just over 7? Yep. About 7 feet. So my attack distance is about 3 feet with my lunge. Even though, if you notice, my foot movement is only about that long. 1 shoe length. This was very, very common in the late 16th century, early 17th century. I don't know how many of you do this, and we're going to test this in a second. Actually, we'll test it now because it's a little bit better to do it. Everyone, go on your normal guard. With single rapier, go on your normal guard. Give yourselves a little bit of space because you will be lunging. First off, a few of you, yes, you can develop a further distance, and we'll show you how this works. There are other considerations, especially for safety reasons of your own body. Body mechanics are key. First off, the Italians, the late Italians, it's all back-weighted. Their stance is always back-weighted. You have 80 to almost to 100% of your weight on your back leg at all times. You should easily be able to do this when you're on guard. Even from Fabris, it doesn't really matter. When you lunge, and since you're trying to minimize the distance you need to lunge, why? It's faster. Recovery time is faster also. It's more secure, and it's much easier on your body. If I'm here, and I go, oh my God, that hurts. Ugh. And it's really, really hard to recover from that because the distance you're giving, you're also giving away more time. Because it sure the heck takes a heck of a long time to travel that far instead of, and gain the same distance. And recovery is just so much easier also. So, things to remember. When you extend and land, short distance or long distance, you want to try to make sure that your calf is straight. Once it lands, you can roll a little bit onto the ball of your foot. You want to make sure that your knee stays in alignment. And also that it doesn't roll past the toe. Again, you can roll slightly forward so the knee does bend a little bit. But once you get a little out past it, then you start getting into really relying on this small portion of your foot to hold all your weight. Land flat, roll forward. I noticed with you, a couple other folks too. Be very careful when you lunge that you don't do this or this. Yeah. And it actually, it's right here. So, minimize the distance you need to lunge. Developing an actual lunge. What you do, and one of the people I've worked most closely with on this, Guy Windsor, from the Helsinki Sword School, came up with a brilliant idea. If you read KWAR, you can kind of get hints in there. It's not specifically, but it's a great way to develop out of it. What is your maximum comfortable place to lunge? You know the mechanics. You know, there's no way in the world you can get past a certain point. You know that you have to be careful with your legs so it's in a nice, secure position. It's not going to hurt yourself or anything. Your back foot should be flat. You can eventually roll forward a little bit for a little extra extension. KWAR does that, a few other folks do too. And it's also part of the natural. It might even drag ever so slightly. As long as it's flat on the floor, you maintain security. The other thing, for safety reasons, is you don't want to push with this knee when you recover from a lunge. You're putting too much stress through the joint. That means actually slower, and it's much less secure as far as being able to get enough energy back. The correct way to break a lunge is to break your back knee and come back. Essentially, you lower your weight back into position. Again, much less stress on that front leg. You're not exerting force trying to go, which again is much slower, harder on the body. So, how do you do this? Especially if you've never really lunged before, or what have you. You noticed here, okay, the period masters say that your lunge really only needs to be about a shoe length long. That's where my stance should be. And if you look at a plate from KWAR, this is pretty much what you see. Fabris actually cheats it a little bit more. It's a little bit closer depending on what hand position and everything is. But still, in general, the lunge is still only about a shoe length long. So a good way to develop it, and safely, because you know what the limit of your body is. You're not trying to throw your body out to that limit. You work from the limit backwards. So, Think about it. Everyone go on guard.